Radio-Canada has learned of an alleged attempt by India to derail Patrick Brown's Conservative leadership bid in 2022. Among other claims, confidential sources said agents of the Indian government allegedly pressured Brown's national campaign co-chair to withdraw her support. Radio-Canada's Brigitte Bureau is here with more on her exclusive story. Okay, Brigitte, tell us more about what you've reported here.
Radio-Canada has spoken with 5 people, separately with 5 people who were closely linked to Brown's campaign. Now, we have agreed not to name these people because they fear for their safety. As you know, the RCMP suspects the Indian government of being involved in murder and other criminal activities on Canadian soil. But according to these sources, Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner was allegedly pressured to stop supporting Mr. Brown. As you know, Michelle Rempel Garner was co-chair of his national campaign at the time. She categorically denies these allegations, and we'll get back to that. But I also want to make it clear that Radio-Canada has no evidence indicating that Pierre Poilievre was at all that knew about these Indian agents' actions at all.
Okay, because he later won that race, of course. So Michelle Rempel Garner denies it, but sources say it was agents of the Indian government. What are these sources alleging exactly?
Well, for instance, one highly placed source in the campaign says that it was well known in the team that it was a source of discussion, of concern also, and I quote, that Indian consulate representatives had approached Michelle, strongly suggesting that it was not in her best interest to continue working alongside Patrick. Now, some sources say they heard it directly from the MP because she held at one point she was on a conference call and they discussed it amongst the team. And we've spoken to people who say who they were on that call. And one of them says that Michelle Rempel talked about Indian diplomats approaching her and telling her, you need to retract your support for Patrick. Later in the leadership race, you'll remember, David, that Ms. Rempel Garner did quit the campaign. Right. She was saying that she was looking into maybe a move to Alberta provincial politics. A week later, she abandoned that idea, but never did go back to Brown's campaign.
Okay, yeah, she was going to succeed Jason Kenney until she decided not to run in that race. Okay, Michelle Rempel Garner, Patrick Brown, a lot of big names in this. You know, the current mayor of Brampton, still an MP. Any reaction from the main players in this?
Now, Brown would not grant us an interview, neither would Rempel Garner, but she did send us a written statement saying that she felt she left Brown's campaign completely of her own volition. She said, and I quote again, "In no instance was I coerced in any manner by anyone at any time." And she also said that she has always taken into account the perspectives of many different Canadian interest groups and stakeholders.
Okay, interesting. Categorical denial, but sources saying she raised it on a conference call with the campaign. Was this it? Were there other attempts at interference in Brown's campaign?
Yeah, many other, according to our sources. For instance, Hindu supporters of Mr. Brown were allegedly told by Indian agents that they should not support him anymore, that they should not be selling membership cards for him, and they should not invite him at certain events. And in the article that we published on the CBC website, we do talk about a specific event where Mr. Brown was a persona non grata. He was supposed to be there. He had been invited, was supposed to attend. His workers were all happy that he'd be able to solicit support from the Hindu community. And he was told, according to our sources, that he was no longer welcome because he had upset representatives of the Indian government. And by the way, the High Commission of India, the consulate also of India in Toronto and Vancouver have all refused to comment.
Okay, that's interesting because, you know, in the past, Patrick Brown was seen as someone who was friendly with Narendra Modi. Obviously, based on this, that would suggest it's changed. So why would Indian agents, why would the Indian government want to stop Patrick Brown from becoming the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada?
Well, according to our sources, agents of the Modi government did not want somebody close to the Sikh community. You know, as mayor of Brampton, the Canadian city with the largest Sikh population, he had close ties. He had become very close to that community. In one instance, there was an event where he showed up, and people some had flags, Khalistan flags, in reference to the independent states that some members of that community are demanding. And that really infuriated the Modi government. And at the time, they had the government itself had publicly denounced the fact that the mayor of Brampton had attended this event.
Okay, so all of this was happening, and then it was something else, because Brown never finished this leadership race, right? He got disqualified. He
was disqualified by the Conservative Party following allegations of wrongdoing linked to electoral financing. Allegations, by the way, and that never made the headlines, but they were dismissed later on by the Commission of Canada elections. By the way, both the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre's office both say they had no knowledge of Indian interference to undermine Brown's campaign. But as you well know, Mr. Poilievre is the only leader, party leader in Parliament who still refuses to get that security clearance that would enable him to access classified documents on foreign interference.
Yes, there is a reference to Indian interference in the Conservative leadership document in the NSI COP report that he has to
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much for this. Brigitte Bureau with Radio Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
In a statement today, the Mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown, said, "Like all Canadians, I take the issue of foreign interference in our democracy very seriously. It is a critical matter that warrants thorough investigation. I have no reason to believe that such interference altered the final outcome of the 2022 Conservative Party of Canada leadership race." Well, as Brigitte said, Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner denies allegations that she was pressured to stop supporting Patrick Brown. Take a look at what happened when our CBC colleague Chris Rance tried to ask Rempel Garner about that this afternoon.
Hi, Chris Rance, CBC.
Chris,
I just got to ask you about you're running away from me. I'm just asking you about the.
I'm sitting having a lunch.
Confidential sources have told Radio Canada that Indian government agents allegedly attempted to interfere in the last federal Conservative leadership race. Radio Canada reports they were targeting Patrick Brown, one of Pierre Poilievre's main rivals in that race. The sources allege campaign workers were told by Indian government agents to stop supporting Brown, not to sell memberships for him, and not to invite him to certain events. Sources also said that Brown's national campaign co-chair, Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner, was allegedly pressured by Indian diplomats to stop supporting Brown. Michelle Rempel Garner has denied this allegation, and Radio Canada has found no evidence showing Pierre Poilievre was aware of this alleged interference. Now, in a statement today, the Mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown, said, "Like all Canadians, I take the issue of foreign interference in our democracy very seriously. It is a critical matter that warrants thorough investigation. I have no reason to believe that such interference altered the final outcome of the 2022 Conservative Party of Canada leadership race." Okay, we're going to bring back the power panel on this. Vanda Nakata, Lisa Raitt, Rob Rousseau, and Brad Levine. Lisa, Pierre Poilievre won that leadership race, 68% of the points, I believe the way it was calculated on the first ballot. But there's been persistent questions since the NSI COP about India being involved with this. What do you make of this reporting from Radio Canada today?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I actually thought that Patrick was close to the Modi government, and I had to stop and start reading other stuff along the way. So I'm not the best person when it comes to keeping up with what's happening there. But I will say I thought that Patrick's statement was very clear. I think he also went on to say that he's concerned that this is politically motivated, trying to get him to appear before the commission, and I take that as valid as well. Look, everyone's going to have to talk about whether or not they perceived something that was happening or not happening at the time. David, what it comes down to is we know we've got foreign interference happening in the country. It's going to pop up in different places at different times. And what we need to do, quite frankly, is investigate this and get to the bottom of every single allegation, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And that includes if the Prime Minister wants to talk about the names of the MPs that have been accused in the current proceedings already. Patrick Brown's name is out there. Pierre Poilievre's name has been put out there. Now Michelle Rempel Garner. It's not pleasant for anyone to be thrown into the middle of an arena being accused of having been intimidated or pressured and not really having the ability to get to the bottom of it. The best thing that we can have in all of this is a thorough cleanse in terms of understanding what's happening.
And well, just some clarification. Patrick Brown would like this to be dealt with by the OG Commission. It's a parliamentary committee that has summoned him to testify that he says is political, because that's the way committees are going these days. Vandana, your thoughts on this? Your crowd has been saying this is another reason for Pierre Poilievre to get the clearance he needs to read the NSI COP report. What do you make of these developments?
It is important that Mr. Poilievre get clearance. I think if you're a leader, if you are a contender to be the future Prime Minister, you need to hear uncomfortable information, just as Lisa said. Being from Brampton, having dealt with this file extensively, I will say that this allegation is serious, it's uncomfortable. I have shared on the show before my experience with agents and interference potentially in the Brampton area. So I think that's something that needs to be investigated, and we need to find out what's going to the bottom of it, not only for now, but just for the future, so that politicians and our elections can be armed against this work.
Brad, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I agree that it's serious and it should be investigated. All we can really do is speculate as to why Patrick Brown would lose the support of the, because I think when he was leader of the Ontario Conservatives, you look back on a social, and he had a very close relationship with the officials in India. There's nothing wrong with that per se, because Ontario is an important market, and there's a huge Indian, South Asian diaspora in the province of Ontario, particularly in Brampton. The only thing that I could assume as to why Modi would not want Patrick Brown to assume the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada is when he was putting together his coalition to win as mayor of Brampton in 2018. He clearly, upset the balance within that, because obviously there are many different factions within Brampton from India, and along the way, I guess, winning mayor in 2018, he needed a certain voter coalition that didn't please the folks back in India, and therefore by 2022.
Well, it's the largest Sikh population in Canada, and he was at events with the diaspora. There were Khalistani flags at the event, and as we all know now, this is something the Modi government, Brad, is highly sensitive to.
Absolutely. And so obviously along the way there, he lost favor with those folks. And the real serious issue is that whether or not the Indian government had agents that did upset our free and democratic process within the Conservative Party of Canada. Clearly, Mr. Brown was disqualified from the race, so the outcome, for different reasons, the outcome, of course, wasn't impacted. But the fact that a government can have, or at least the speculation here, that according to the reports from Radio Canada, have that impact on a political party, a national political party within Canada, it should be of great concern to all Canadians, regardless of their political point of view.
Well, Rob, it may put some meat on the bones of what is on page 32 of the redacted NSI COP report, right? That says, bullet point 73, this paragraph was deleted to remove injurious or privileged information. It described India's alleged interference in the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. This would certainly meet that bar, right? Telling delegates or members not to sell memberships, not to vote for him, and allegedly pressuring Michelle Rempel Garner to pull her support from Patrick Brown.
There are a couple of things that I think I can deduce from today's events and Brigitte's reporting. Number one, my news bunion is aching after I see this story and see the way people react to it. To read the statements from Patrick Brown, from Michelle Rempel Garner, from the Conservative Party, is to drown in non-denial denials. Nowhere in any of those statements do we see anybody saying that the agents of the Indian government did not try to influence the outcome of this story. Lots of denials about other things, but not about that. That suggests to me that there's some smoke and there's some flickers, and there may be some flames and further reporting to be done there. I think the other thing that we can deduce from all of this is that no matter what we hear in the political cut and thrust, all parties have a responsibility to do something to clean up the way our leaders are selected, the way our candidates are selected. And up until now, they have refused, essentially, that they continue to consider themselves closed and private clubs to decide in their own way how they will attract new members, how they will elect leadership candidates, and that compromises the security of, I think, Canada's political process. So all political parties now have a stake in cleaning this up, and we should demand that they do that.
Well, just to follow on that point, though, Rob, like the Conservatives say they're clean, but their leader and nobody else from the party has gotten the clearance to read the briefing. So how do you know? I guess is my question, because this seems like a pretty serious thing beyond, you know, the Han Dong thing in Don Valley North of international students from a Chinese school coming to vote in a nomination. This is picking a leader and forcing people out and allegedly, you know, pressuring an elected member of parliament.
Yeah, look, I spoke to somebody who was a leadership candidate in the 2017 Conservative leadership campaign who desperately was trying to get Patrick Brown on side. And why? Because almost every leadership camp considered him one of the best organizers in the country. I think the quote was, nobody could rack 'em and stack 'em like Patrick can. Okay, so he has a reputation of being able to bring people into a leadership campaign very, very quickly among Canada's diaspora communities. So that's there. But you know, does that mean that anybody wittingly aided and abetted the Indian government or worked with the Indian government? I don't know. But we should try to find out, and we should try to get our political parties to tighten up the way they select candidates and the way they select the leaders. I think that's in the interest of the political parties, and it's in the interest of a healthy democracy in Canada as well.
So, Lisa, with this reporting and these revelations, what should Pierre Poilievre do now? Because he is facing this criticism to get the briefing from, you know, the Liberals, the NDP, and others. Specifically because of this Indian bullet point in the NSI COP report. Now we have a little bit more detail on what that likely was about. I mean, is it time to just get that briefing, read it, and see what you need to do and what the truth of the matter may be in terms of what happened in the leadership race?
So I would answer that by saying this. Has Mr. Trudeau changed anything now that he's had the briefing of what's in that report? And I think the answer is no. But equally, they have had accusations from within the Liberal Party that there have been difficulties with foreign interference as well. So the notion that if Pierre Poilievre decides that he's going to not be able to ask questions on this topic because he's going to be taking the briefing, if that is going to actually change anything, why is it changing it in his case, but it hasn't made a change in anybody else's case? Like, the logic isn't working for me. What I do know is that if there's something in there that is absolutely crucial and important, CSIS does have the ability to brief Mr. Poilievre on it, and they can use that route instead of the route which is the one that causes the difficulties for the Conservatives, saying that they want to be able to ask questions on the topic, and their hands would be tied if they couldn't do so. But again, back to the logic of it, David, every other leader who presumably may have people from their own caucus involved in this matter, has read the report, and they've made zero changes in the way in which their leaders are chosen or the way in which they are dealing with their local members of parliament. So I don't know what the magic is in having Pierre read it and everything changes at that point.
Because his is the only leadership race that's implicated in the NSI COP report. Like, there's nothing about Jagmeet Singh or Justin Trudeau's leadership race, Lisa, that would suggest a foreign state was involved.
It's all about.
Right? So like, this is what, so Han Dong is out of caucus while that is being investigated. He's not going to be the Liberal candidate in the next election. So that's an action.
How do you know that?
Well, because they're not going to bring him back. I think that he would have been back by now, don't you think, if it was going to happen? But this is the only leadership race that we've seen implicated. So we've talked a lot about the Liberals and their lack of response. This is new information on what happened with the Conservatives, right? So you don't think he should read it to figure it out? Because Ward Elcock and Richard Fadden would tell you CSIS can't brief somebody without the security clearance in a meaningful way. He needs to have it to get this information.
Yeah, I don't know. This notion that he can't get a security clearance, I'm not sold on that.
Oh no, I'm not saying he can't. He's just he can't be briefed without it. I am not feeding into those internet conspiracies.
Okay.
It is he has made the choice not to get cleared to read these specific documents.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And you know what? The politics of this is that day in and day out, these kinds of panels are going to happen with the question about why is Pierre not asking for the briefing. And I think that is something that they're going to have to calculate and figure out. That's the path forward. But from my point of view right now, if they choose that they don't want to read it and they want to be able to criticize the government and criticize the process, that's the choice that they're going to make. And they're going to see whether or not it's the right choice.
Okay, Vonda, I got about 30 seconds left. Just give you the last word.
I think what worries me most about this is how to protect Canadians. I mean, Canadians from diasporic communities. You come here, you become Canadian, you know, but you still have your personal beliefs. And I think we need to protect Canadians for having those. I might have views that are different from the Indian government, but I'm still, my heritage is Indian. My family's there, they take visas there, but, every citizen should be able to share and express what they need to express and not be vilified for it. And I think for Mr. Brown, if Sikh community are residents of Brampton. And if he has to engage with them, he should be able to do that. And I think we should be protecting not only Canada, but also these Canadians from foreign interference. And that's why people need to get clearances, and we all have to get behind this. It shouldn't be a partisan issue.
It's interesting how things have evolved on this over the past year, from concerns about, 2 years, from Russia and China to now the India thing. There's misinformation, disinformation, pressure, and maybe buses in a nomination, but now violent crime, allegations of murder, criminal activity, and this sort of stuff. It's been a remarkable developing story, which I'm sure we'll talk about again. Got to say goodbye for now, though. Vandana Cotter, Lisa Raitt, Rob Rousseau, and Brad Levine. Thank you so much.